morning, everybody. Shabbat Shalom and Hag Sameach. We are at a very important time and a season in the kingdom of heaven as it exists upon the earth at this stage, in the early initial stages, the imperfect stages of the kingdom of heaven. Operative here. It is my honor and my privilege to be here with you today. I've got a few friends here from the Biblical Lifestyle Center on this beautiful day in Texas. But for all of you who get a chance to join us from the world, from all over the nations, from all the continents, from all the hills and the valleys and the locations of our Holy One's creation, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to spending this time in preparation for the Passover, the season of unleavened bread, the times of counting the Omer and preparing for the great day of Shavuot, the release of the wisdom of Torah as led by the Ruach HaKodesh, the Spirit of the living God. What an honor it is to be with you and to do these things and to be allowed this time on the earth, this precious time on the earth to walk with the Holy One, walk with our King, walk with our Creator, and to follow Mashiach, our wonderful Messiah, into all the things he wishes to do in the earth, upon the earth. This is the week where we will spend some time discussing Parshat Tzav, but it is overshadowed by the fact that we have a great day we're about to enter into, a great season that we're entering into. So Parshat Tzav, which is Leviticus 6:8 in the usual English versions of the Bible. The numbering is a little different in the Hebrew Bibles. But in the English versions of the Bible, it's Leviticus 6:8 through 8:36. A little over 2 chapters of the book of Leviticus that we will focus on this week. But everything's overshadowed by what's coming. The overlapping of the calendars, the calendar of the Torah cycle, which puts us in Leviticus 6:8 through 8:36, is overlapped this time by the calendar of the Moedim, or the festivals, the special, unique seasons and days of our Creator that He's ordained for us to observe. So the two things coincide, and at sundown tonight, according to the most traditional reckoning, the Passover will occur, and we will begin the 7 days of unleavened bread. So we are at a auspicious time, a joyful time. And yet a time when we sit back and pause and meditate. What is this season all about? Why does He want us to do this every year? Why does He want us to remember certain things and tell our children certain things? Because the primary mitzvah, or the instruction about Passover, is about what we tell our children. Is anyone hearing a sound besides me? A warning. A weather warning, I guess. Now, so we are supposed to. What are we supposed to tell our children? You can get lost in all the minutiae and the details of how people tell you you're supposed to observe Passover. You can get caught up in all the intellectual processing of dates and seasons and all that stuff, or you can say, "But this is my season to tell my children the important things that of who we are and why we're here and what our purpose is." And so that's what Passover is all about. Tzav is about learning to transition as well. So the two correspond well. Tzav is about learning to move in perspective and focus. We have been talking in the first week of Leviticus about the fact that we are invited to approach the Creator of the universe. We're not expected to live our lives separate from Him. We're not expected to do the best we can down here, reading and studying and fighting and feuding and arguing over theology. We're expected to have an intimate, ongoing relationship with the Creator. He wants that for us. He wants that from us. And He has instilled in each of our deep souls, the deepest part of our being, this hunger to be with Him, to spend time with Him, to commune with Him, to know Him, to talk to Him, to respond to Him as a bride responds to a bridegroom, as a close friend responds to their close friend, as a disciple responds to a rabbi. He wants us to to do that. And deep in our soul, the eternal part of what he put into us is a hunger, a thirst to have that relationship with him. And so we learned last week that he knows that we have a challenge to face. He knows that we are not really in our flesh and in the operating of our pseudo-intellect, our intellectual processes of what we think is right and wrong and fair and unfair and good and evil and pleasant and unpleasant. He knows that in those contexts, we operate independently from him. The more we think our own thoughts. The more we read and study, the more we get caught up in thinking our own thoughts about what we just read and studied. And so he says, now, you can live life that way, but I have a higher plan for you. I have a higher design for you. And that higher design is to instead of focusing so hard on all the things you can read and study and learn and design or plan from your own mind, to actually follow me, to learn to approach me, to get close to me, to begin to draw off of my energy, to draw off of my wisdom, to draw down the holiness, the kedusha as it's called in Hebrew, this energy of heaven drawing you into a place of productivity, fruitfulness, wholeness, health, healing capacities, all these things that he has designed for humanity to have. They depend upon us having communion with him. So last week we learned from the standpoint of an individual human being what it means to actually change our focus from the world and the things we read and the things we think we know to actually tuning in to the Creator and beginning to try to move from where we are and where our thinking is and where our emotions are, move into the realm where we're actually communing with him. We're actually encountering him, responding to him. He's actually the most important factor in our lives. We learned that last week. 5 ways. He said everyone who comes is going to have to deal with 5 pathways, 5 obstacles have to be overcome in order for you to do that. And we talked about those 5 last week. The human will, and that's what the burnt offering or korban olah is supposed to deal with. Then the materialistic bent where we focus on substantive things, material things, wealth, worry about money, worry about finances. These things, that was the second obstacle we have, because we think if we don't do all this other stuff to make money and to acquire goods and take care of our property and mow our yard, there's no way anything matters. And so therefore we get occupied in those things as opposed to thinking about him. So that's the second obstacle. The third obstacle is we look around at other people and we judge them. We criticize them. We blame them for our problems. We are angry at them over the things they're saying or the things they're doing or the things we think they're saying or the things we think they're doing. We are offended by our fellow man. We are critical of them, judgmental of them, and that is an obstacle because the more we're thinking of critical things about them, that means we are not thinking of following him, of getting in touch with who he is. We have to disengage from him to be offended at somebody else. We have to be disengaged from our passion and our search for him in order to accuse them of sin or to blame them for something that's happened to us. We have to do that. So that's the third obstacle you have to overcome. And that's what the peace offering was all about. We talked about last week. The issue of the dealing with the material issues was the grain offering. It's about Leviticus 2. Leviticus 3 was the peace offering. Leviticus 4, we have another problem we have to overcome. He has told us what life is designed to look like. He has written a book to us, Torah. He has given his instructions for what human life is designed to look like and consist of, and how we're to respond to certain situations, how we're to focus and be motivated in life. And we have said, nah, I don't think so. How that's going to fit in with my plans. And so we have chosen to disregard and ignore or just plain disobey his instructions for living, and this is Korban Hatat, or the sin offering, as it's what we have to go through a process of laying aside all the reasons we had why we didn't follow his instructions. And that's what sin offering is. It's not about morality issues. We're not about dealing with morality. We're dealing with our issue of not being able to respond to the words of the living God like the energy and the life-giving force they are, but instead treating them as some sort of a burden or a challenge that we don't want to face that would somehow impinge upon our happiness or our joy. And so that's the fourth one. The fifth one, the last one we learned, is we have an obstacle, a hindrance to our communing with God, and that is the issue of our negative emotions. We either feel guilt or we want to impose guilt. We want to impose a guilt trip on other people, or we want to assume the fact that we are so guilty he can't love us, we can't be loved, we can't be social, we can't be around other people, we're not safe to play, we don't play well with others. We go through this negativity emotion syndrome: guilt, shame, jealousy, envy, all the different negative emotions, greed, these things all. And he says, you've got to get over that if you're going to proceed in relating to me, having a relationship with me. So we did that last week in Parsha Vayikra. He gave us these protocols. You could get lost in the protocols. You could get lost in each individual instruction as to what he's doing, but every picture tells a story. The design is not to get you involved in putting animals or taking grain to an altar somewhere. That will happen, but that's the picture that tells the greater story. The greater story is we're going to be able to overcome every obstacle to walking with him, talking with him, communing with him, learning from him, drawing energy from him. He has a way provided. My youngest son has written a song that the words of it just keep pounding in my head. You know, at one point in it says that you'll see some mountains move, some waters separate. He'll make a way for you. He keeps the promises he makes. You'll see some mountains move. You'll see some rivers separate. He'll make a way for you. He keeps the promises he makes. Now that's the message of the first parsha of Leviticus. And hopefully we're caught up in this groundswell of that. The passion. My God loves me enough. He loves people, humanity enough, that he is going to make a way. But he knows what our challenges are. He knows what our weaknesses are. He knows what the gaping, bleeding, leaching holes in our soul are, and what would keep us from being able to do what he's designed us to do. And he wants to make a way for us through all those things. That's a beautiful realization. I hope you've thoroughly been caught up in the beauty of the fact that our God is that good and his plans are that good for us. But now it's time, just as it is with Parsha Tzav, is a sort of a transition. And as Parsha, as the time of Pesach and unleavened bread is a time of transition, so it's time for an attitude adjustment. It's time for a perspective change. It's time to come up here, come up higher, and begin to look. Because all so far it's just been about, I can talk to God. He can communicate with me. I can overcome all these things of humanity, these fallen parts of humanity, and we can commune together. That's about us. We want that. Our hunger wants that. This week, Parsha Tzav is saying, okay, now that you know what you want, now that you know how you can do, can you want the same for other people? Can you begin to see other people through the same lens that you've looked at yourself? Can you begin to see them and see the Holy One's hunger for communion with them and his desire to be close to them and to have them approach him and to overcome all their obstacles? Can you see through the eyes of one who would be a helpmeet, one who would be a helper, one who would, instead of being a judge, instead of being a critic, instead of being someone who is in any way negative toward their fellow human being, could you instead say the real problem with humanity is that they do not know how to commune with God? They do not know how to draw the energy of his holiness. They choose not to follow his will. The same holes that were in my soul that kept me from being able to commune with him are what's really wrong with them. So I can blame them, I can criticize them, or I can help them. I can be in a position to say, okay, what can I do to help this other person? Be it my friend, be it my relative, be it my child, be it my parent, be it my enemy, be it my neighbor, whoever it may be that my goal is not here to judge them. My goal is here, my purpose of being here, is to get the perspective of how can I be a helpmeet to my King and helping them to find the same level of freedom that I have found of how to relate to God. So Parshat Tzav is about this. And it takes us from the standpoint of being and I'll call it a worshiper, a seeker, someone who comes and brings that which needs to be done to get through and get to the communion place of God, the place at the brazen altar, to being the priest, the one who has dedicated his life, or her life, as in our world, that might be, that dedicated our life to say, I know people are flawed. I know they've got these major issues. And sometimes one acts up more than another. One problem surfaces and comes to the surface and boils up more than another. And it may repulse me. And my tendency, my flesh tendency would be to be angry about it or be critical about it or be judgmental or just be insulted by their presence. But what if I didn't do that? What if I overcame that and I realized how much the Holy One loves them? And I realized how broken they are. What if I realized how much they need to have someone walk them through this process without condemnation, without judgment, without love? And what if I was responsible to be the priest? So Parshat Tzav is all about looking at everybody, the same things we looked at last week, through the eyes of a priest as opposed to a seeker or a worshiper. Parshat Tzav is you've got to get your head inside the head of a priest. Or you've got to get a priest inside of your head in order to do this. Now, I don't want to get you too caught up and let you forget that Messiah, Yeshua of Nazareth, is the great high priest. If you have Yeshua in you, if he dwells within you, if you have he in you and you in him, Messiah in you, the hope of glory, then you have a built-in priest living inside of you. A priest that has the capacity to see the things we're talking about. And to overcome the challenges of that. Now, let's just assume that you were an Aaronic priest living at the time of the tabernacle. Let's just go through a fact scenario or a concept here. And you had the robe on. You were a son of Aaron. You had been consecrated. You had been trained. The oil, the smell of the fragrance of the oil, the fragrance of Mashiach, Messiah was on you. The precious garments of linen were upon you. And here you are. You report for duty. The candles are burning on the candlestick and the menorah. The incense is coming up, and as it does, the bread's on the table. The fire's on the altar, and you look and you're reporting for duty, and through the gateway, through the entrance to the tent of meeting, here comes man, woman, young man, young woman, old man, and they come and they've sinned, or they've just got caught up in other things, or they just hunger to meet with their Creator. And they are there, and they don't know how to do this thing. They may be a mess. Their life may be a total mess. They may have hurt somebody you know or somebody you love. They may have hurt you. You're a human being. You live in the world too. But whoever this is, their greatest need at this particular stage is not to have you judge them and tell them what they did wrong. Their greatest need is to find a way to leave behind the those things that are obstacles and hindrances to their relating to the Creator of the universe. And you're a priest. And your job is not going to be pleasant if you want to judge them. If you want to criticize them, you're not going to approach them with a smile and with a welcoming and with the idea that you're going to leave. You're going to want to say, go away till you get yourself right. Don't come near me. God doesn't want anything to do with you. God hates you because of your sin. But now if you're a priest, you have to have the mindset of, no, it doesn't. That is flesh. That is my pseudo-intellect. That is my fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil acting up. My job is not to do that. I'm going to have to get my emotions, get my attitude, get my mood, my personal feelings out of the situation and realize I am here for a higher purpose. I am subject to a higher call. I am here but to serve, not to judge. And so you're a priest. So you have to have the mindset of a priest when they come. And you know they're a mess, or they wouldn't be there. You know they've hurt people. You know they've caused grief. You know they're spiraling downhill, and they need something to change their life. Can you see through where they've been to help them change where they're going? That's the idea of getting the mindset of a priest, looking at things through this. And you say, well, that's the Aaronic priest. That's all Old Testament stuff. That's all Torah. This all sounds good. It's just theory. It's just a picture. So why then does Peter in the New Testament keep talking to us about the priesthood of the believer? Why does he keep talking about us? You are a chosen generation, a royal. You heard it. You know what I'm about to say. You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. That's who you are. And if you ever want to doubt that process, your priestness is the higher level of your calling. This is why we are at that breaking off point. We're at that point of departure this week. From Tzav, the week of Tzav is always when we start to quit focusing on our personal issues and our personal needs, though they still exist, and begin to focus on other people's personal problems and personal needs and needs to get in touch with the Creator. So this is Parshat Tzav. Passover is the same thing. Passover is about passing over. If you're not leaving somewhere, if you're not transitioning, you're not making Passover. You may be doing all the right stuff. You may be having a Seder meal. You may be saying blessings. You may be drinking 4 cups of wine. Or if you don't want to do that because you think it's too legalistic or whatever, you may be dipping matzah in bitter herbs and telling your children a story. That whatever level of Passover you engage in is really a failure unless you pass over. The Holy One is the one who says, I will pass over you, but when he passes over us, what are we supposed to do with that? Thank you very much. See you later. No, that's not the way this works. If you know the story, when he passes over, we follow. He gets in front. We let him get in front of us. Maybe he's been behind us. He's been around us. He's been anywhere. We're doing our thing, and he's out there somewhere. But no, now that Passover is, he comes and he passes over. We let him. We stop. We step back from where we are. We let him be the leader, and he passes over in front of us. And then, in the wake of who he is, in the beauty and the majesty of how wonderfully he moves, in the grandness of his persona, he passes and moves in front of us, and that's why we follow. We don't follow because we're trying to get away from Pharaoh. Well, there's a part of our flesh wants away from Pharaoh really bad. Why did we follow him? At first, maybe it was just to get away from Pharaoh and Egypt and bondage and slavery. But somewhere along the road, we realized it really wasn't that at all. It was because he was calling us, drawing us into a destiny. So he didn't lead us through using Moses. He led us through the pillar of the fire and the cloud. He led us through a manifestation of who he was, of his beauty and his light. And then his depth, the cloud shows the depth and the way in which we have to keep pursuing him to see through the fog. So we begin to see this Passover, Tzav, they're all about making this transition. And so as we enter into this season, I want you to enjoy your Passover with your family. But what I know the Holy One is calling you to a whole lot more than that. The Holy One is calling you to come into his way of looking at life. To leave some things behind in the way you have thought about the world. to leave some things behind in the way you have looked at other human beings, groups, how you've labeled, how you've classified, how you've evaluated. Here's what criticism is. You put a lower value on them than God does. Judgment, that's what judgment does. You put a lower value on someone than God does. So you've done all these. Now he said, I want you to come up. I want you to step up. I want you to get out and let me lead you. And then this wonderful thing about the leadership of God, he's always taking you somewhere. It's not just getting you where you follow him. It's not just about the relationship. Once you get into the relationship with him, you realize he's taking you somewhere. He has a plan for you. He has a set of assignments for you. He has an ecosystem he wants you to manage. It's like you get a new garden of Eden. You're going to tend and keep it. You're going to abide, and you're going to shamar it, and you're going to treasure it. And your job is to be the chief oak tree in the ecosystem that nurtures the roots of all the others that are in there, that provides sustenance and provides shade, provides food for the creatures there, provides a place of beauty to which all can... You're supposed to be the tallest oak tree in your forest. This is what he designed you for. Now, when we realize that, now we can say, oh, how can I then nurture the oak trees growing up under me? How can I nurture the animals, the other wildlife, the creatures that dwell here within us? How can I nurture the earthworms and the insects and the mosquitoes? How can I provide this ecosystem to be as close to the plan of God for it as it can possibly be? This is the change in mindset. And I have to be with him. I have to let him lead me to do this. Now, so we are at Tzav, and we're at Passover, and this is a dramatic time. 3 times a year, we have this kind of a, wow, you expect that of me? You want that from me? You think I'm capable of this level of interaction with the world and getting out of my head and getting out of my emotions and getting out of my flesh? You think I'm 3 times? Take a deep breath, because he wants to take you higher. He wants to make you so important to your world, so beautiful in your world. He wants to take your ashes and make you beautiful. And speaking of ashes, let's use that as our segue. I'm going to stand. Those who are in the room with me, I ask you to stand. We're going to read from Leviticus, from our Parsha this week, beginning with chapter... This is also in the English Bibles. In your Hebrew Bibles, they're going to start with 6:1, but in English Bibles, it's 6:8. Same verse, same language. I'll read it in the English, but before I do that, we'll say the blessing of the house. If you know it, you can say along with me. If you don't, just enjoy. Hopefully, it'll stir you as well. Open our eyes, O Holy One, our God, that we may see wondrous things in your Torah. For we are but strangers in the earth. Do not hide your commandments from us. Our souls cry out for your judgments at all times. How can a young man keep his way pure? By living according to your word. Your word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. Amen. Then the Holy One spoke to Moshe, saying, command Aharon, Aaron, and his sons, saying, this is the Torah, this is the law of the burnt offering, or Korban Olah. The Korban Olah, or burnt offering, is to be on the fire of the altar, and is to be kept all night until morning. The fire shall be kept burning on it. And the priest shall put on his linen garment and his linen trousers. He is to put on his body, and he then is to take up the ashes from the Korban Olah, or burnt offering, which the fire has consumed on the altar. And he is to put them beside the altar. And then he is to take off of his garments. And he is to put on other garments. And he is to carry the ashes outside the camp to a clean place, a place of wholeness and wellness. And the fire on the altar is to be kept burning on it. It is never to be put out. And the priest shall burn wood on it every morning. And he was to lay the korban olah, or the burnt offering, in order, in sequence on it. And he is to burn on it the fat of the shlamim, or the peace offerings. A fire is to always be burning on the altar. It is never to go out. Amen. You may be seated. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Now we're not the worshiper. Now we're not the seeker. Now we're not the broken vessel who's coming to be healed. We're the priest responsible for making sure this experience can happen in real time, in a real life, for a real person. We have to deny ourselves, because this is not about us. This is about the King who we love and who we serve. And this is about his prodigal child who is coming home. Nothing about how we feel about it matters. Nothing about how inconvenient it all is to us matters. Nothing about who's right or who's wrong or who's good or who's evil or who's fair or who is unfair or who is moral or who is unmoral or who is just or who is unjust. Nothing about ethnicity. Nothing about philosophy. Nothing about ideology. Nothing about form of religion or orthodoxy matters. The only thing that matters is the will of our Father and his drawing of this person who has come before us. And us connecting the two as he gives us the ability and the instructions to do. We've got to keep the fire burning. And then it's like, I thought this was some glorious position of ministry where I get to be public and I get to do these glorious things. And now you tell me my life is filled with putting wood on the fire, making sure if anybody's ever run a fire in the cold weather and you got to keep that rascal going and you got to chop the wood and the kindling, you got to keep the fire burning in a practical way. And then the other thing about fires that burn is they burn up stuff and create ashes, and the ashes stink, and the ashes prevent the fire from burning right, and you've got to clean up the ashes. He says you're going to get your linen garments dirty. This is not clean stuff you do in an ivory tower. The life of a priest is life lived at a messy, bloody, stinky altar, dealing with people's messes and not judging them for it, and not being repulsed by it, and learning how to take your deep breath and do what you do, and take the ashes. This is called avodat hadeshin in Hebrew, the ministry of the ashes, the ministry of dealing with the residue of people's messes. The residue, the junk that's left behind. You go back a week. Go back to the altar when you're the seeker and you're the hungry to learn to commune with the Creator. The Holy One's calling you. You get your will aligned with His. Hallelujah. You get your material instincts subjected to a higher plan. You get your relationships back in order where you don't blame people and hate people. You get past the fact that you've been forgiven for the things you did that were against His Word, and you've realigned yourself with His Word and His instructions for life. You've gotten past the negative emotions. Your guilt is gone. Your shame is gone. Your envy, your jealousy is gone. Hallelujah. That was then. Now we're in another realm. Now we're trying to do this for somebody else. We look at it a different way. Now what happens, as the worshiper, the seeker who goes through this process, he walks away rejoicing and dancing and singing and with a bounce in his step and a joy in his heart. And the priest is left at the altar with ashes. Smelly, stinky ashes. Ashes that clog up the fire. that make you have to, and it's going to get all over you. And you're going to have to take it outside the camp and dispose of it. And you have to pick a specific, you can't just take it out and just dump it over the wall. You take it to a place that's prepared for it, that's designed to handle it. This is your job. Welcome to the world of thinking about life as a priest. And all the time you're doing it, you could be thinking in your mind, in your pseudo-intellect, that guy was a mess. That woman was a pure, hot mess. What a hypocrite she was. He was. What a useless piece of humanity that was. I disagree with all of her philosophy. I disagree with his politics. I disagree with his ideology. I disagree with their religious perspective. I didn't even agree with their calendar. I don't agree with the way they said the name of Yod He Vav He. I didn't agree with the way when they meet and when they don't meet. I don't agree with any of that stuff. Now, or you could do that, but you need to get those ashes taken care of and out. And you're going to realize if you do that, you need to be back in the state of the worshiper again, back in the seeker again. You need to go through the processes again because you let it get back all over you. You lost the priest mindset. Now, I hope you're seeing and hope you're sensing that this call upward at Passover, he is taking this great leap ahead of us. And he's saying, would you come after me? Would you follow? Because you're going to come to higher levels when you follow me. You're going to come to higher levels of responsibility. You're going to come to higher levels of accountability because you can't go around with dirty linen. You got to change your linen. You got to keep a clean uniform. You got to stay representing the glory and the holiness of God no matter what happens around you, no matter what kind of stink or mess other people throw at you. You've got to stay above it. This is your next level of calling up higher. This is what Passover, what happens at Passover? Immediately we step into another realm. We step into the realm of unleavening. 7 days of unleavening bread. Of not eating leavened bread, not having it in our houses, not having anything that rises. Now, and we're going to talk about this process in the context of, hopefully, of Parshat Tzav. As we're thinking about the Avodat Hadeshin, we're also dealing with Avodat Hametz, the ministry of the Hametz, the ministry of the leaven, the ministry of the yeast, or the yeast-affected products. So we're going to discuss that a little bit. Let's just have coffee, you and me. So, what is this leavening process? What's it all about? I mean, is this really just about cleaning out our cabinets and our cupboards? I mean, we do need to clean out our cabinets and our cupboards. But is this what this is about? This is about sweeping the floor underneath the microwave. Is this about checking the toaster and dumping it and making sure that there's no crumbs in the toaster? Yeah, it's sort of about that, but that's only a picture of a greater reality. We need to understand leavening. We need to, and you know, I know that there's a whole tradition that just kind of writes it off and says leaven is sin. That's so simplistic and so wrong. Leaven is everything, and I'll tell you what leaven is. Leaven comes from the concept of making bread. If you take flour, ground wheat, or ground barley, or whatever grain you want to use, you take the ground flour and you add water to it. Then a process begins, and it is different depending on where you are, what environment you do it in. But whatever is in the air of the place where you are begins to interact with the water and the flour, and there's chemical changes take place. And what happens is the stuff in the atmosphere of where you are is caught up in the changing process that takes place as water meets wheat, the chemical change. And so it becomes, the environmental factors become engaged in part of your bread. If you could have a good enough sense of smell or taste, you would taste the things that were in the atmosphere when you were making the bread. And so this is what leavening is. Your environment that you're in is affecting you, and what you provide to the world, what you offer to the world, is affecting, and you don't even know it. But this is the leavening process. What you're getting is a mixture of what God's doing, what you're doing, and what the world around you is doing, and you're bringing into the world this, and then you perpetuate it. You're bringing this mixture of things, and you're perpetuating that in everything you say, in every conversation you have, in every interaction with another human being you have, in every interaction with creation. You're bringing this mixture of environmental factors and your flesh factors and divine factors into the world. In Egypt, you had bread, you had wheat. Well, you had wheat and you had water. And if you mix the water and the wheat together, or the grain together, what immediately happened was that it began to absorb the toxicity of the Egyptian environment. All the spiritual toxicity of Egypt, all the emotional trauma of a slave quarters, all the negativity of hatred of race between races, the Egyptians versus the Hebrews versus all the other people that the Egyptians had enslaved. You have absorbed all that stuff, and the bread that you're making and presenting to the world is now polluted bread. It is now bread that has some nurture to it, but also carries toxins, also carries the negativity. It also reproduces the garbage that you allowed into your life or had infected upon you or imposed upon you in that environment. So 7 days we are to eliminate every foreign influence, every toxicity of the environment around us. 7 days we are to cleanse the whole process and change our environment. Because what happened during the 7 days that we're talking about? During the 7 days, we put distance between us and Egypt. The 7 days immediately after Passover, what did we do? We followed Moshe, we followed the pillar of the cloud, we processed through, and every step we took us a step further away from the toxicity of the environment of Egypt. And finally, on the 7th day, according to tradition, we passed through the Sea of Reeds. We passed through the last outpost. Past the last outpost is Baal Zaphon at the edge of the wilderness. We passed out of Egyptian domination, out of Egyptian influence. We passed through the Sea of Reeds. We left behind the soldiers and the oppression and the warfare, and we came out on the other side at the end of the 7 days. And at the end of the 7 days, what happened? The waters came back together and congealed. We saw what happened to the Egyptian soldiers. We saw the armor floating. We saw the rains, all the stuff that came out. And we understood that we were free. Understood that we no longer were under that domination. We were no longer under that control. We were no longer under that threat of annihilation. We were no longer under that. And what did we do? Oh, spontaneous eruption of praise. Spontaneous eruption of joy. We found our song. we found our voice. We found the rhythms. And the tambourine was beating, but not according to our fleshly sound. It wasn't a sound from Africa anymore. It was a sound from heaven. We quit trying to sound like the Egyptians that we'd ever heard. We didn't play music like that. We didn't play instruments like that. We didn't sing like that. We sang a song we heard from heaven. We now had a new leaven, a new environment that we began to recreate. And everything started with the song of the sea and the sounds of I will sing unto the Holy One, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider has been thrown into the sea. He is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. It goes on. Who is like you, O God, among the gods? Who doing wonders? All through the song of the sea, we begin to get a new environment. The environment of heaven began to enter into us. A new level of environmental forces to build our bread with. And that's why we re-leaven after the 7th day. We should, by that stage, have passed through the encounters, through the last phases, the last stages of toxicity from where we came out of. But this transition needs to take place. This is more than just obeying a few rules. This is more than just following a sacramental system. This is about learning to put aside all the toxicity of the place we were before we started the endeavor, and to begin to draw instead and re-leaven with the leaven of heaven, with the leaven of the heavenly realm, of the beauty realm of God. And so that's where we are now as the priest. We're back to the priest for a second. We have made the transition, right? We have presented our Korban Olah. We have had this encounter with the Holy One at the Korban Mincha, the grain offering. We have gone through the protocols of the Korban Shalim, and we've had our fatted calf killed. We've eaten with our friends and with the priest, and we've said, we're at peace with all men. We will hold no grudge. We will hold no effect. We've gone through that process, right? And we've come through. We've gone through this issue of saying, I know I have not been faithful to your word. I have not done what you said. I've lived my life in ways that were not the way you designed me to do it. I am back now. I'm back where I'm the prodigal son, and you put the robe on me and the ring on me, and you put the sandals on me, and you've called me son. No matter what has happened, and you've changed me where I want to always follow your will and do your ways. You've taken away all the negativity, the emotions, and the guilt and the shame that I felt, and what I want to project onto the people. You've taken that away from me. So what do I do now? Where do we go from here? Talk about what song my son wrote, and one that I woke up in the middle of the night with. Where do we go from here, my king? I'm following you. I'm on the right track. I got my hand to the plow, and I'm not looking back. Where do we go from here, my king? That's this challenge that's right for us now. And so as we are at this moment of hitting the transition, we're coming at sundown. We're going to be trying to make that tip of the fulcrum, where we have now come past the Red Sea. We've got rid of all the toxicity of the environment we came out of, and all the thoughts processes, the negativity of thinking and speaking, the vocabulary that they used in Egypt in our places of bondage, the ways of talking about other people and seeing other people as objects, as labels. We've come out of that, right? So we come to a tipping point, and now it says, now that we're there, now that you've done this for us in our lives, where do we go from here, my king? What's next? How can we now move with you, follow you, let you lead in this great dance as the sounds of heaven come forth? You know, what happened? What happened when Miriam heard the sounds of the song that was being sung by Moshe? What happened when the women began to hear the men sing? What happened whenever the chorus broke forth? Well, Miriam grabbed her tambourine and she danced, and all the women danced. This is a great dance of Passover, the great dance of this season that we're in. I mean, I know some folks don't believe in social dancing, but let me tell you this. You're going to have to be open to the possibility that there's a spiritual dancing that you will be doing. And the spiritual dancing is following a leader. And the following that leader means you move when he moves. You let him be the one who takes the lead. You follow his example. You do what he does. You say what he says. Now, Yeshua is the perfect example of this. He said it over and over again. He said, I do not speak my own words. I only speak the words I hear my Father saying. I'm paused. I'm letting him pass over in front of me. I only do that which I see my Father doing. I am not out here doing my own thing. I'm not starting a religion. I'm not starting anything. I am merely following my Father. I'm able to see who he is, hear who he is, in the same way any human being can do so. I can see what he's doing, and I will choose to focus on what he's doing rather than what men are doing. And, you know, Yeshua could have gotten all up into Herod's face. He could have really voiced his opinion about the policies of the Roman government or of the Sadducees or of the Pharisees who were following and who were trying to co-labor and work within the context of the Roman government. But that was never his point. That was never what he did. He danced with his Father instead. He followed his Father's lead. So he never went looking for trouble with the Herods. He never went looking for trouble with the Pharisees or the Sadducees. If they were there, he dealt with what had to be dealt with. And there were reasons for what he did and how he did it. and why he did it that way. But he never went looking for them to cause that trouble. He never made a big public, people say, well, he would have done this or he would have done that on Facebook. I strongly suggest you might want to reconsider what you just thought. Because I think you're thinking of him in terms of your own head and your own belief system and your own toxicity that you've gotten from living in this environment here. And you're trying to project onto him, and that's not the way this works. The kingdom of heaven does not work by you projecting your feelings and your attitudes and your angers onto God. It is laying down your attitudes and your angers and your opinions and your beliefs and letting him lead you in a walk, in a dance, in a song, in a life that provides bread for the nations, provides life, provides health, provides hope, provides possibility. There is one more thing that I want to point out, and that's at the end of Parshat Tzav. The end of Parshat Tzav changes the focus a little bit to, now that I've told you what a priest does, how a priest approaches situations, and how you focus on the work that needs to be done for the sake of the kingdom, now let's go back and let's get you ordained. Let's get you inaugurated. Let's get you sanctified. Let's get you consecrated. And so the last thing that Parshat Tzav talks about is a 7-day season, a 7-day period, when the priest is actually set aside. For 7 days, you don't go outside the tabernacle. For 7 days, you don't engage in things that people around you are doing. For 7 days, your total focus is upon the Holy One and His plan for your life and where we're going from here, my King. For 7 days. Does that sound familiar this time of year to anybody? This is what the Feast of Unleavened Bread is all about. We are undergoing the 7 days of consecration. Now, what happens in these 7 days of consecration? Well, you can read Leviticus chapter 8, and you can figure these things out. You can look at the list of the to-do list of what Moshe was supposed to do with the Aaronic priests. Or you can say 7. Where have I heard 7 days before? Where has 7 days entered into my consciousness before? What is the spiritual reality beyond 7 days? And what has to happen in 7 days? Well, let's go back to creation story. Day 1. We are all, who are we? We are Eretz. We are all earth. And it begins, Bereshit bara Elohim ha-shamayim b'ha'eretz. We, in the beginning, as it says in English, God created the heavens and the earth. Remember the earth part? That's you. And we're in the tabernacle. We're now in the consecration period, the 7 days of unleavened bread. And it's day 1. We're starting at sundown. Day 1 starting at sundown. And what is it? And He created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. Tohu uvohu. It was filled without any form or substance or purpose or meaning, and engulfed in darkness, in thick, utter darkness. That's how we start the process. So your 7 days, if we're going to be in 7 days of consecration, if we're going to be in 7 days of unleavening, we got to go back to tohu uvohu v'chosek. 7 days. Oh my goodness! So the first day is throwing away everything we think we know, everything we think we've done, everything we think we have to offer, and going back to the place of we're clay for the potter to mold. Now, the first day involved that, and then it involved, and the Spirit, the Ruach of God, the breath of God, brooded over the face of the deep. There was this movement, right? Passing over. He passed over the face of the deep. So we have Passover on the first day. And we sense this process of Him brooding, His moving over us in His Spirit. And moving and stirring something from deep within the deep. Stirring something within us. This is our first day of unleavened bread. We're supposed to feel that stirring of the Holy One passing over us. And calling us and drawing us into Himself with a plan, with a strategy in mind. And we're just tohu uvohu uvkosek. Ooh, a little bit of mayim, a little bit of water down here. We're just in the deep realm, but He's going to bring us speak to deep. And so He begins to speak. And so also on this first day, He says, Yehi, are, light, become light, come forth. So this is that first day, the first day of unleavened bread that we celebrate. This should be a day when we are returning to Tohu Uvohu Uchosek. When we're returning to, we realize we're without form. We need to be shaped, reshaped. We're without order. We're not in perfect sequence that we need to be. We need to be placing priorities the way they're supposed to be. And we need to come out of the darkness and become the light. That's our first step. Day one of the 7-day period of unleavened bread. It always goes back to that first sevens, to the sevens. 7 days will repeat itself at Sukkot. We're going to do this again, right? But this is our season to come forth. Day one is all about tohu uvohu, brooding, the Spirit brooding over us, the breath entering us, drawing something out of us, and bringing us up to the point of where we can actually become light in the world. Day two. What's day two? Day two is when he begins to separate that which is earthly from that which is heavenly. And the waters, he separated the waters above from the waters below. We now have another reservoir where we can draw water from in the heavenly realm. Learning how to focus our attention on the heavenly realm, not on drawing our water from the things of the earth, from the teachings of men, from the religion and the orthodoxy of organizations and institutions, from the teachings of the secular world, for heaven's sake, from the science and the medicine. That is not where we're going to draw our strength. We have another reservoir. We have a revelation source in the heavenly realm, and attaching ourselves to that heavenly revelation source and realizing that we must keep the avenues flowing between us and that revelation stream. Third day of we're going through this whole process. Every day part of this consecration season, and part of our unleavening season is to do something akin to day three. Day three, the dry land separated from the water. He called forth the continents of the creation week, and then he began to call forth and said, let the earth bring forth. Let the earth bring forth grasses or grain, in which is its seed, and trees bearing fruit. I told you about an ecosystem, right? I told you it's what we're basically called to be, is be the largest oak tree in the ecosystem. Well, that is what he's calling forth. What I designed you to be, let me begin to stir it out with a life-giving, cross-generational, ecosystem nurturing power. Let me do that in you. And that's the third day of the consecration process, the third day of our unleavening. The fourth day, what is it? He's going to set things in motion around us. This is when the stars, and this is when the planets, and this is when the heavenly bodies begin to be placed in proper order. All the sequencing of what we will be looking at. What is that sequence there for? To give us times and seasons, to put us in order, put us in sequencing of all things. So it gives us the context, the greater context in which we operate all of our lives are based upon what we see in the heavenlies. The heavens declare what? The heavens declare the glory of God. And so we have that. Now we're in context. Now we're in place, in position on the earth. And now what's day 5? Now around us we see life beginning to come forth. And life begins to burst forth, first from the sea and the skies. We see the life forms of things that are movement. We see angelic beings all the way down to the smallest birds, the wrens, and then we see in the creation week, we see the fish and the dolphins and the creatures of the sea all beginning to burst forth. Our ecosystem begins to function at the lowest levels. And that has to take place for the higher levels to take place. And then we have the 6th day. And the 6th day is when the creatures, first of all, the living creatures that will provide food and sustenance and that will keep the things fertilized and clean and keep the ecosystem functional, they come forth. And then comes forth on the last part of the 6th day, comes forth, wow, here comes man. And God will speak over you what your purpose is. You are to be what man was called to be. Let us create man as our shadow, as the image for the world to see of what we look like, what God looks like. Now we see why 7 days of unleavened bread is prescribed, why we do 7 days at Sukkot. Oh, I didn't mention the 7th day yet, did I? The 7th day. The 7th day is the day when we put all of it aside and we glory, we rejoice, and we recognize the holiness. We draw down the holiness of God for the next season of which we are going to operate. Remember the 7th day. and keep, treasure, cherish, guard, absorb its holiness. That becomes our purpose. Remember the seventh day, absorb its holiness. And so now we're going through this entire 7-day season of unleavening, the 7-day season of ordination corresponding with Parshat Tzav, and the 7 days of creation being recreated in us. We are going somewhere. We're called to a purpose. This is bigger than our belief system. It's bigger than our political positions. It's bigger than our ideology. It's bigger than our opinions about our fellow men. It's bigger than any label that they can put on you, or you can put on any other person or any group. This is about learning to draw and be drawn, to draw upon your revenue, the revelation stream of heaven, and to be drawn into the revelation stream of heaven. And learning how to see other people then, and look at the world around you and the circumstances we live in through a perspective that says, how can I serve? How can I help? How can I follow? What are you doing here? Where do we go from here, my King? What are we doing today? How are we bringing life and health and peace into this ecosystem, however messed up it is, and into these people, however messed up they are, and into our world, however fallen it may be, into the futility of creation, the way it looks? How can we bring health, healing, wholeness, light, love, divine energy of holiness into everything we touch? Well, this is the call of the season, and this is the challenge of the day. Don't just have a Seder. Seder means in order. As a matter of fact, that term also comes from our Parsha. If you want to know what a Seder is, that's what Jewish people do around the table. They have a custom of doing certain things, putting them in order and sequencing and different things around the table at Passover. But it comes from this week's Parsha, from Parshat Tzav. And when he says, arrange the wood on the fire, it's Seder. Make things Seder, Beseder. Make things in order. And then according to the ancient way this was done, the ancient process of how the priest did this, what you had to do is actually you had 3 fires going at the same time. You had to put them in order. You had to keep each one dealt with at a time. The first fire on this altar, the first pile of wood was designed to be used to actually burn whatever you put on the altar. That was where the lamb was put. That was where the goat was put. That was where the grain was put, the 3 fingerfuls of grain. Whatever it was, this was where it was. That was fire number 1. And that had to be kept burning. Second thing of the arrangement, part of the Seder. The second part of the Seder was the fire which was burning to make coals, so that coals could be removed from this altar and carried in a fire pan into the holy place and placed upon the altar of incense, the golden altar of incense, to cause the sweet, pleasing, fragrant aroma to arise. And so you had to plan to have coals to take to the incense altar. And so you had a separate fire there, Beseder. You had to keep things in order. And you had to stoke the fires a little different, because one, you're trying to burn things on a grate. On the next fire, you're trying to build up a residue of coals that you can separate and keep hot, so you can take in when the time comes and put it on the altar of incense. The third part of the Seder was the part that he references in the latter part of the verse. And the third thing is, third part of the Seder is, and make certain that what happens here is that you keep the light burning, eternal light, ner tamid in Hebrew, the idea of a lamp that is continually burning, that never goes out, that doesn't diminish, doesn't flicker in the wind, that keeps this fire burning at all times. This fire is burning, not for purposes of consumption, not for purposes of use in any of the other altars, just to keep the fire burning, keep the light shining in the atmosphere. So now we found the Seder. If you want to know what the Seder is, think about the purposes for which those fires are built. The first part of the fire, as a priest looking at this world, is saying, okay, what can I do to help other people lay aside the hindrances that keep them from having communion with God? How do I keep this going, keep this hot enough, but not too hot to burn the person where they won't come? I've got to make sure I got to be very careful at what level of heat I allow to come out of this. Just the right amount, but not too much. I can't do what I think's right. I would build a big bonfire. I have sons that I call them pyros because they love to build bonfires, and they just keep adding wood to it until the thing keeps going up. But you know what? When you do that, everybody starts backing away. Everybody who's sitting around the fire playing music, as we do in our family, they just start backing away because the fire is too hot, as pretty as it may be. And that's what the issue is, learning as a priest, learning how to make the fire hot but not too hot. Learning how to make the change in lifestyle that's called for by getting close to God. Hot but not too hot. Not where it will repel people, where it will continue to draw people and continue to yet be hot enough to affect and make a change in their life, where they just can't come, dump the things, and go away the same as they came. No, it has to be hot. So that's the first aspect of our Seder, the first part. So if you look at how we do the Seder, it's past, present, and future. It's learning how to present the story of the Exodus, the first part. It's learning how to present the story of the Exodus in such a way that doesn't repel our children, doesn't scare them, doesn't make them say, what is this? Actually, it draws them into the fire, draws them into the plan, makes them feel a part of this whole process. So the first step in our Seder should be to do that. The second step in our Seder is then to say, okay, now we're going to build something for later. We're going to build into with the idea of present leading to future. We're going to have coals that will be able to take them into the future and bring forth a pleasing, fragrant aroma. So the middle part of our Seder should be about that. It should be about, okay, now we're dealing with present, but we're dealing with present from the standpoint of looking toward the future and how we can make a pleasing, fragrant aroma arise by virtue of our lives. And then the final part of it is we're supposed to be making sure that the future is always going to be bright. We're not prophets of doom. We are not voices of despair. We're not voices of condemnation. We are to say to the world, there is a light shining, there is a lighthouse, there is a place to go, there is a way to overcome, there is a way to transcend. He will make a way for us. We are here to make sure the world never forgets that. Our children never forget there's a way, a place, a new life, a higher calling, a form of beauty, a place of beauty, of wholeness and wellness. Well, thank you for joining us today. We're through with our Parsha for the day. I encourage you to really set your Seders up right this week. Enjoy your time, but think about what you're doing here. This is not a sacrament. This is a relationship-building experience for yourself and the Holy One, for yourself and your family, for yourself and your neighbors if they happen to be able to come or be with you, or as you just have interactions with them in any form. You should change. There should be a definite positivity shift in your life over Passover, over the week of unleavened bread. And when we come forth, we should not come forth polluted by the environment. We should come forth as a pleasing, fragrant aroma in a new environment. Thank you very much. If you're here, if you're watching, please leave a note that you were here, or your name and the continent or the country from which you are. We will pray for you. We do it every time. And we do enjoy the fact that we're fellowshipping with you across the world. Blessings, shalom, Chag Sameach, enjoy the new freedom the Holy One's given to you. Amen.